Hey, thank you for tuning in to another episode of InRange. This is the April 2018 Q&A. It's just me this time. Ian's out traveling the world. I think he's in South Africa or Narnia or something like that. So it's just me. Hopefully this is still interesting. We get lots of questions. Being on the Patreon at the $5 level and above gets you the ability to ask a question. And the reality is we always get more than we can deal with. In fact, when I first printed out the questions, I had 12 pages. I've curated it down to 6, and that's still going to take a while. So I apologize if I didn't get to your question, but just keep asking it. Eventually we'll get there, and I hope you understand that we just can't get them all. But thank you, everyone, for your support at whatever level. Let's just get going. Dale S. Do you still have plans to check out the Desert Tech MDR? Well, I'd love to check out the Desert Tech MDR. We shot it briefly at the SHOT Show 2018. Found it to be a very compelling bullpup. And you know me, I'm not a bullpup guy. And we fired that thing, and boy, that is an interesting gun. The ability to change it from left to right eject, the balance, the trigger was superb. It could be a bullpup game changer, to use that terrible term. We did talk to them a little bit. They only have the 308 one out right now, and it's in limited numbers. They are moving to also creating a 5.56 variant of the gun, which I think it's modular. You can switch them back and forth. And quite honestly, I'm only interested in the 5.56 gun. I don't really have a need for 308 in my life, at least not in a modern iteration of a gun. And so I was talking to Desert Tech about getting a hold of their 5.56 in a beta project, but it didn't quite pan out. They seemed like maybe not. We'll keep an email thread going. We'll see if I get on board with their beta program. But when the 5.56 gun comes out, I definitely have plans to check out the Desert Tech MDR, perhaps even acquire one or run it in matches, etc. So stay tuned for that. So far, I don't really have anything more to say about that. By the way, it's getting hot out here today, and this is when the flies start coming out here in Arizona, and it's extremely unpleasant. John W. Ian is using a Glock Roland Special. Will Karl be making or rocking a 92 FS Roland Special? The Beretta. As you guys that have been watching the channel for a while realize, I'm a real fan of the Beretta 92, and I've had great success with that pistol. I've done really well with it just in its iron sight guise. I did modify it to a G model, which is a decock only. The safety on the slide, I accidentally engaged it a number of times, and that is, in my opinion, an issue with the Beretta 92. But I do not plan on red dot enhancing my Beretta. The slide system there and the gun itself doesn't lend itself to a red dot system, so it's not really an appropriate gun to choose for that type of force multiplication. So both Ian and I have been using a Glock 19 Roland Special. That's, of course, our version of it with a Delta Point Pro and a K-Arms comp on it. Fantastic setup, really great gun, and we did very well with it at Tiger Valley. I have been recently using a Hudson 9 that I've modified with the help of K-Arms again with a Delta Point Pro. They've cut the slide for me. I don't think I'll be putting a compensator on that. In fact, it's interesting that the Glock 19 Roland Special with a comp on it and the Hudson 9 without a comp, due to the design qualities of the Hudson 9, plus probably the weight as well, it just doesn't really need a comp. It feels actually a little better in terms of recoil mitigation than the Glock 19 Roland Special. Now, if you want to get into real hackery with Glocks and you go to a Glock 17 Roland Special, that's even better than a Hudson 9. So I'm pretty much keeping my Hudson 9 in the original guise, albeit with a Delta Point Pro and +2 magazines. The biggest issue for my Hudson right now is magazine capacity. 17-round magazine capacity is quite a bit of a deficiency when you compare it to the stuff that's available for Glock with 33-round mags, especially at things like hard as hell 2-gun or big long events. So I'm going to go ahead and keep leveraging that Hudson 9 with the Delta Point Pro in spite of the magazine deficiency. In fact, my plan is to use it at the hard as hell 2-gun coming up. So I do not plan on making a Beretta 92 Roland Special, but stay tuned for more of us using both the Glocks and the Hudson as well. Desi O. You mentioned in a previous Q&A that you dislike Glocks. Has your stance shifted since using the quote-unquote Roland Special? Not really. I still don't care for Glocks. Glocks, by the way, are the AK of pistols. They are very reliable, sufficiently accurate, durable guns. There is really nothing functionally or practically wrong with the Glock, with the exception of I just don't care for the way they handle. I don't care for the way Glocks feel. I don't care for the way they look, and I don't care for the way they carry. That said, the Roland Special we built, which also include stippling and frame reduction from We Plead the Second, does make that gun a very different gun. Once you add a red dot and a comp and put a better trigger in it or a disconnector and then reduce the frame, it's quite a different beast. So I would say, has it changed my stance on Glocks? Not really. Has it changed my stance on a highly modified Glock? Yes. So the Roland Special type config Glock, when done properly, is a fantastic handgun platform. Benjamin R. With the 7.62x25 Tokarev's flat trajectory and decent penetration, why is it essentially relegated to feeding surplus of reproduction firearms with almost zero modern firearms produced in that caliber? Is there a major downfall of the caliber that I'm missing? You know, I've wondered about that myself. It really is a great cartridge, and it really is still 30 Mauser. They took 30 Mauser and just upped the powder charge, increased the velocity. 88 grain bullet, moving pretty fast. Ability to beat simplistic soft body armor as well. It's an interesting cartridge. Why do we not see more of it? I don't have a good answer for that. I think the mass of the bullet being 88 grains is considered deficient, and the velocity isn't quite compensating for the bullet mass. And so we've seen with the continued evolution of the 9mm that 9mm has really become the standard. And so as a result, any other cartridge starts to become not necessarily unnecessary, but pretty irrelevant. So I think that's what we see with the Tokarev. 7.62x25 Tokarev has just been diminished to historical guns, and I don't think we're going to see anything more come of it. Mitchell C. How did average people in the Old West carry their rifle ammunition? I believe you previously said that only thugs and gunslingers carried the iconic crossed bandoliers. That's kind of true. The crossed bandoliers really was socially unacceptable. The cartridge belt, which was with one gun, which a belt with a bunch of cartridges in it and one gun on your side, was considered generally acceptable. And if you had a lever gun that was chambered in the same cartridge, say like a 73 or a 66, then that was ammunition for both your pistol and your rifle, and that's quite convenient. That still is a convenient thing today if you're going with a PCC and a pistol. Oddly, having two guns on your hip was actually considered also socially unacceptable. People that came into town with two guns were considered, generally speaking, malfeasance. So one gun on your hip and a cartridge belt was very common. A bag, literally simply a bag, like a canvas sack with ammunition in it. Little ammunition boxes on your belt that had ammunition in them, that was common as well. The bandoliers were construed as negative. Two guns was construed as negative. Cartridge belt was considered acceptable. But let me remind you that gun control in the Old West was far more intense than it is even in the modern day. Most towns did not allow you to carry openly. When you came into town, you had to surrender your firearms, generally to a local bar. They would keep them under the bar counter. But so carrying ammunition in town just wasn't a thing. People would put their little 32 pocket thing in their pocket and not say anything. Sounds like the common day and modern world, doesn't it? But in terms of carrying ammunition, generally a sack or a cartridge belt. David P. Are you going to do an 80% build? Probably not. Probably not. It's compelling. It's interesting. Like there are Glock 80%, there are AR-15 80%. Don't think we're going to get into that. It's just not that interesting, technologically speaking. I think it's socially interesting, but it's not technologically interesting. So probably not. The build we did with the Set-Me-L was really in-depth, and we went from parts to a completely functional delayed roller gun. That's a technically interesting gun. Essentially drilling a bunch of holes out of a lower that's not quite complete just doesn't really turn my crank that much. So to be honest with you, probably not. John G. What firearms handling drills can you recommend for someone to do at home if they have limited access to range time? Well, obviously this is going to go without saying. Make sure the gun is clear, clear, clear. No ammunition in it, near you, no magazines with ammunition near them. Have all that ammunition put to the side. The best thing you can do is dry fire. Whether it's a rifle or a pistol, put a nice little dot on the wall. Obviously, clear, clear, clear. Put it on a wall that's safe. And then just do dry fire drills, maybe from the draw to ready, and just click. And you want to make sure that those sights don't move off. There are things you can do. There are a bunch of enhancement tools, even putting a laser on it. Now, this is where a laser matters or can help. Having a red laser on your pistol can actually show you when you pull the trigger where that laser moves when you pull the trigger. There are other tools on the market for that as well, but my best recommendation with rifle or pistol is strictly just dry fire practice on a dot on the wall. You'd be surprised how much they can actually enhance your trigger press and your follow through. London J. What are the best and worst pieces of firearm advice you've ever heard? Oh boy. The worst one that comes to mind is the thing you always see that they try to do to women that go to the store. Oh, little lady, you can't handle a real gun. Why don't you take this 38 snub nose? That'll be your carry piece. That is so prolific and so horrible and such the wrong information that it's the first thing I can think of. It's not really the best gun for anybody. It's a last-ditch gun that is used by professionals in last-ditch situations, and it should not generally be your predominant carry piece unless there are really circumstances that dictate as such. But the idea that this little gun that's cute or whatever for a woman is just really doing a disservice to her if she's actually seeking out personal self-defense. And it's also doing a disservice to her in general in that she can't handle a real gun. First of all, you're giving her a gun that's harder to use, and you're making a really inappropriate statement. In terms of the best piece of advice, practice. Always practice. Don't be discouraged. Don't walk away from something that seems hard. and do the hardest things that you can imagine possible with your drills and skill set building. If it's something you're good at, you want to go out and do it, and you're like, wow, look at me, I'm good at this. That's the stuff you shouldn't be practicing, right? And it's kind of what I try to do with two guns. I try to put things out there that challenge people in ways that are unusual and unorthodox, that get us out of our comfort zone. So I guess the best advice I could have would be practice in unorthodox ways safely to put yourself in the most uncomfortable situations possible. Alex L. Karl, are you going to do a video on suppressors for the What Would Stoner Do rifles, or was that not considered relevant to the project? It wasn't considered relevant to the project, however, we did dabble with it briefly, and we have a special bolt carrier group. We've done some high-speed footage of it, and we will talk about suppressors on ARs at some point, but it wasn't something we needed to worry about for What Would Stoner Do. So stay tuned, and you will see some suppressor content about AR-15s in general, and those, of course, include the What Would Stoner Do project. Christopher, would you rather have a pistol or more ammo for your rifle for general combat use? Easy. More ammo for my rifle. I don't want a pistol at all. If I have to, I mean, the pistol's there as a secondary. It's only there if you really absolutely need it or for extremely close quarters. But if it was a decision between you can have a pistol or you can have more ammo for the rifle, I'm going to take my reliable rifle and I'm going to take in more ammo. Always, no doubt. Ammo is life, and your rifle is your primary fighting arm, and so therefore I want to be able to make that fire as much as I need to for as long as I need to. Jonathan J. What gun nerdy books on modern carbine usage, history, mechanics do you recommend? One came to mind immediately. Green Eyes Black Rifles by Kyle Lamb. It's a little bit dated by now standards, but if you go look it up, it is a fantastic treatise on the use of the practical carbine in practical ways. So I would highly recommend that. Let me recommend Green Eyes Black Rifles by Kyle Lamb. I'm going to go ahead and read the whole name on this one because I'm pretty sure it's an alias. Spanky's Basement. Do you think an echo trigger in Ian's rifle would help him spin the spinner? Nope, absolutely not. No way, shape, or form. I don't know how much you guys have done with echo triggers. I played with a few of them. In my opinion, they are gimmicks, they are toys, they're potentially unsafe, and the ability of any type of force multiplication you think you might get from an echo trigger to keep shots actually reliably on target when you're firing, essentially pulling and depressing, I have found to be very, very challenging. I tried to keep rounds with a high rate of fire with an echo trigger on a piece of paper at 15 yards and found it very difficult. In fact, it was much easier just to put a nice K-Arms or SLT1 type trigger in a gun that's just a standard but good match grade trigger. I could have almost the same rate of fire, but could actually control my pairs or control my bursts and get them on target. So I do not think an echo trigger helps for anything other than turning money into noise, and at that regard, somewhat unreliably. Sorry. Dustin F. Have you ever been DQ'd from a match? If so, why and what lessons learned? Absolutely. Only once. And believe it or not, it was a high power match. I was on the high power firing line, and I had a malfunction during the rapid fire course of fire at prone. Rapid fire being 60 rounds and, or excuse me, 10 rounds in 60 seconds. Not rapid fire by two gun standards. But high power likes to reinforce a bad thing. When your gun malfunctions, you don't try to clear it, you raise your arm and you get what's called an alibi. And so what we did is we cleared the gun. I was empty. I was the only one on the firing line. And so I got to do my rapid fire string again. So everyone's off the firing line, and they bring the target up and they give you kind of a certain duration of time for you to dry fire on the target. The RO would come over, watch me eject the magazine, run the bolt open. I close the bolt, go to dry fire on the target during my personal dry fire minute of preparation, pull the trigger, and bam! The loudest gunfire shot that goes off ever. Hit the X-ring and was DQ'd immediately because it was not a live fire portion course of fire. What were the lessons learned? Opening the action does not mean that the action's empty. Sometimes it does not extract and eject a round. If I had tried to put my chamber flag in there, I would have found that. Or if we had done what we do at two gun, is close the bolt and dry fire safely, impact it into a berm. If there's a round that didn't get out of there, well, first of all, visually identify the chamber, which I did not do because it was hard to see in there. Second of all, what we do at two gun, which is drop the bolt and dry fire it into the berm safely downrange, we know there's not a round in the chamber. So I learned a number of things. Opening the bolt does not mean a round will eject. Not visually identifying is a problem, and that resulted in a DQ. Was it embarrassing? Absolutely. Did it cost me the day? Absolutely. Were there lessons learned? Yep. So yes, I have been DQ'd. That was the only time. Hopefully there won't be another one, but there certainly could be. Will R. What were your original goals with InRangeTV, and how have they evolved since the start? I think we've talked about this a little bit here and there. The original goals was Ian and I to work together and do what we kind of have been doing, which is look at modern guns and historical guns through a modern focus, like through the lens of history. And so I think we're doing that. I think you see a lot of that on the channel. It was supposed to be Top Gear-like, and we were going to have 1-hour episodes, and that's changed a lot. Clearly, we started on full 30 only. We weren't going to go on YouTube. Now I'm on 5 different distribution networks. It's become sort of one of the channels that's a spearhead for our digital rights in terms of being able to distribute our content without being blocked, censored, or whatever. So I think InRange has changed quite a bit in that regard, in that we are now, generally speaking, 5 to 1 hour long episodes about specific topics. We have a lot more match content than I originally intended, but I think the original spiritual goals of InRange are still in existence, although the fight for our digital rights has been something that was not expected to be part of InRange, but became part of InRange. So I'd say that's evolution, and as you know, if you watch the channel regularly, I find that to be even more important than some of the other stuff we're talking about for hopefully obvious reasons. Jonathan B. 2-gun seems like a great way to get out and learn some very valuable shooting skills, but I'd really like to see it firsthand before I made the investment in getting all the equipment. In your experience, what is the general stance of people going to just observe a match, and are spectators discouraged or looked down upon? First of all, 2-gun has probably the lowest cost of entry of equipment you'd ever need. A basic rifle, even an AK, and a basic pistol, the lowest end Glock possible, and a little bit of accessories, 2 to 3 mags for each, would get you through a normal 2-gun action challenge match, at least one of mine. So I'm not saying you should invest, I'm just saying that that's the lowest cost of entry of any match I've ever been to. In terms of are spectators discouraged or looked down upon, I would say a 2-gun action challenge match, my 2-gun match, as well as Desert Brutality, no one is looked down upon for whatever reason they're there. If they're there to increase their skill set, that's fine. If they're there to have fun, that's fine. If they're there just to watch, that's fine too. As long as they're safe and they're being cool, no one's looked down upon. We are a wide, broad tent, and we want everyone there that's interested, whether they're there to watch, participate, win, lose, or have fun or otherwise, or just be there for the camaraderie and the friendship. Those are all welcome things at the 2-gun action challenge match, so do not feel discouraged. However, I would encourage you to just bring out cheap stuff and give it a whirl. Casey, do you allow AR pistols and what the ATF declares as a firearm in your matches? Yup, I don't care. As long as you're legal and your gun's legal, I don't care. Bring it out. Have fun. It's not my job to enforce what you're using at a match. Get that question quite a bit, and I kind of find that interesting. I don't know why. Yet we've had people bring out all sorts of stuff. Have at it. Brando Spoke. Where did you guys come up with the name InRange? Your channel is not relatively new, so I'm kind of puzzled why it has not been asked before. You know, that was me. I actually came up with InRange. We were toying around with all sorts of names and couldn't really think of anything, and then InRange popped in my head, and it was like, okay, shooting a target is InRange. InRange is concepts, InRange of concepts and thoughts and ideas. And then I created the first logo and added the guns, and we had the very historical gun and the AR-15 on the logo, and it just worked. So both Ian and I went, you know what? That's the good answer. That's the one. We're going with it. That's what it became. It also wasn't used by anyone else, which helps. Matthew J. One pattern that I have consistently noticed over the last decade or so working in software and computers in the Boston area is that most engineering types, at least more than half, seem to have photography or shooting or both as a hobby, sometimes both. Do you see this holding up in your part of the country as well? Absolutely. I do, absolutely. I have a lot of videos on InRange about the convergence of technology and firearms and interest, and I think people that are computer engineers or technological engineers find all sorts of technology interesting, whether it's cars, guns, computers, the net, whatever, you name it. And so as a result, both photography and guns are sort of this interesting technological thing that can do stuff. And so therefore, I absolutely see at least more than half, if not more. If you've been watching the channel for a while, I've done videos from DEF CON, which is a hacking conference. We have shoots there. I was just recently at the Carolina Con in Raleigh, North Carolina, and we had a shooting day before the hacking convention. There's absolutely convergence there. Now, a lot of the computer guys and hackers are more hackers than they are gun guys, and some of the gun guys are more gun guys than they are hackers. But there's absolutely convergence, and I think it's across the board. I think it's a universal interest in technology. I think it's a wonderful thing that we share that, and hopefully we can share more with each other than just guns, because there's more to life than just guns, believe it or not. Steve B. Could you reflect on going from quote-unquote internet famous to being a spokesperson for Second Amendment rights? Wow. It's just me here today. Maybe this one's for Ian. I don't know that I'm internet famous, quite honestly. Have a moderately large-sized channel. Made some waves recently, got on Vice News and such. And I don't know that I'm a spokesperson for anything except what I believe in. So that's why you see digital rights. You see anti-censorship. You see the belief in technology being agnostic, firearms being technology, malware being agnostic, malware being technology. So I don't know what to say to this, because I don't know that I feel that I'm internet famous, and I don't know that I'm a spokesperson. I think that I just feel like I speak my opinion and my voice, and it resonates with some people, and I'm glad to hear that I'm not alone in that argument. Doing stuff like being on the front end of some of the controversy with YouTube and being willing to say and speak out against what YouTube's doing, and hopefully putting out a argument that technologically we can solve these problems through decentralization, the removal of AdSense, and not letting ad money be used as a weapon against us, i.e. Patreon or crowdsource funding. Hopefully that set a pattern in place that others will follow, because I do strongly believe in it. Using things like BitChute and technologies like WebTorrent as a mechanism for distributing content, even if it's not where the views are, is relevant and powerful and important. So I guess I would reflect on, hopefully we're having an impact. All I can say is I hope that the work that we're doing matters. I'm not going to say that I'm internet famous or a spokesperson outside of that. Adam G, what other gun channels do you personally watch? Any that you'd recommend avoiding? You know, I don't really watch any gun channels. I watch other stuff. I do so much gun stuff for InRange that when I want to watch something else, I kind of want to watch something else. So I don't really watch any gun channels, and even if I had ones that I would avoid, I'm not going to say anything. I think it's up to you as the individual to dictate what is right for you and what's wrong for you. And when people leave a comment on InRange, they go on a channel or a video, I'm like, this sucks, you guys are dumb, it's the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. I don't understand that, because the easy thing to do, and frankly the most positive thing to do for you and for us and for the world, would be to just close the window and go watch something else. So if something isn't for you, that's fine. Go pursue what is for you. If what we do is for you, then please be here and watch it. If you really like it, support us. So in terms of stuff I don't like, I don't really have a reason to say anything about it. So hopefully that's a reasonable answer. Leslie W. Given the advancement of technology, would you say that an under $500 deer season special rifle scope combination in some version of .30 caliber from a big box store is equal to or greater than the equipment that Vasily Zaitsev or Carlos Hathcock had during World War II and Vietnam when they made their exploits? Well, I would say that Carlos Hathcock actually leveraged the sporting rifle quite a good part of his career. So that's proof right there. But if you were to take a $500 .308 or .30 cal anything from Walmart with a decent scope on it, is it better than, like, say, what Vasily Zaitsev had with his Mosin 9130 sniper? Yes, absolutely. No doubt in my mind. Variable scope, better glass, better ballistics, better accuracy, better trigger, polymer stock, better in every way, shape, and form. A $500 rifle from Walmart will beat the pants off of an 1891-30 sniper rifle. No doubt in my mind. That's how much technology has changed in a relatively short period of time. Brian I. What was your favorite part of the What Would Stoner Do project? The Tiger Valley two-man match. Ian and I had a freaking fantastic time at that match. That match is a great combination of practical real-world skill sets and the ability for us to portray the rifles in an environment that was relevant to what we were trying to build it for, which is a practical handling. And boy, did those rifles perform in that environment. We didn't win the match. Both of us made a couple mistakes. We could have been second. We landed up sixth, but it was still a good show. We had a good turnout for ourselves. And the What Would Stoner Do rifles absolutely performed flawlessly with no issues, no malfunctions, accurately, lightweight. They just disappeared. They weren't bad on your back. They weren't bad in your hands. So I would say my favorite part was the Tiger Valley the Tiger Valley two-man match. Hopefully there's another one in November and we'll be there. Although we probably will be using different guns for that one. CJS. Whatever came of the M27 SCAR project? Oh, it's still there. We've actually filmed a number of segments. A bunch of other stuff got in the way. Some of it's already ready to publish. It just hasn't been published yet. So stay tuned and you're going to see some M27 and HK MR556 content coming to the channel. If you didn't notice in the Desert Brutality series that's up right now, Yari and Vili from Varasteleka used my MR556 / M27 / IAR build for the match, and they really enjoyed using it. They were both like, oh, the HK gun. So there you go. Marcus K. Is the sound of a gun important to gun guys like car sound is to a petrol head? You know, there's always something kind of impressive about a big boom or something like that. And I think that I'm going to differ on this one because I don't feel like it is. When guns go off, I'm like, maybe I'm around them a lot and I don't really get a lot out of it. But I know some people really get a lot out of it. I see it in YouTube comments. Wow, did you hear that? Did you hear that? And being in person when it's going off is, of course, even more impressive. But I would say the roar of a powerful engine is actually more impressive to me than the firing of a impressive gun. So for me, hopefully this isn't disappointing. No, not really. Not really. Justin C. What is your gut feeling on the intention of YouTube's new gun policies? Do you think it's a baby step to appease the anti-gun crowd, or do you think they want to snuff gun channels out? I think it goes in line with everything YouTube has been doing, which is that it's all arbitrary and capricious. They don't have an intention beyond, wow, this gun stuff scares some of us, and we don't know if we like it or not, but we don't want to be perceived as censors, but we don't want to allow stuff on our network we don't want to allow. So we'll write this open-ended thing that allows us to do something to someone if we feel like doing it, whether or not they've done what we said they did, because we can argue they did it. And and that goes across the board. The demonetization is going like that. The flagging situation is going like that. It's not just gun stuff. It's across the board. YouTube is trying to be mass media, and they were never originally mass media. They were crowdsourced media, which has become a massive thing, more powerful than the mass media, more important than the mass media. So when the mass media wants to publish their content on YouTube and usurp what YouTube was, then content creators like myself or others, whether their content's gun related or not, becomes problematic when it gets more views than the mass media stuff. So I don't know that's wholly the reason, but I think there's some manipulation going on in the back end that is some of that. I think part of it is to appease people that are up in arms, pun not intended. And I don't think that it's to snuff anything out. I think it's arbitrary. I think it's a company looking out for what it thinks its best interests are, and its best interests are to make money, because it's a company. It's amoral, not immoral. It's doing arbitrary and capricious things, and we've allowed them to have power of a magnitude we probably shouldn't have allowed them to have. And it's on us now to, as the customers, content creators, to ensure that they don't have the power to do that, because they are the largest repository of digital content, video content on the internet. And as a result, they are the video library of Alexandria. And having content being removed from it is extremely disturbing to me. George B. If I could be gifted with any firearm, regardless of price and for personal enjoyment, not for resale, what would you select? This would be completely cost dependent, because there's a lot of stuff that I can't afford that I would like. Due to my interest in the Eastern Front and World War II, I would really love to have a really perfect condition MP40. Not even an MP44, STG-44, I'd like an MP40. I think it's an interesting, compelling submachine gun. It's iconic, and I would love to have one. Can't afford it. So that would be it. I wouldn't sell it. I'd love it. I'd shoot it in matches, and it would be very interesting to have. Max S. What is your do-it-all round in 5.56? I get that a match ammo is expensive and that 55 grain is cheap. What is your ideal round? Is it 62 grain, 77 grain, etc.? There's no ideal round. The round that you choose is based on what you need it to do. For matches, we tried using 75, 77s, and while there's a little bit of ballistic capability that comes with that, a little bit of defeating the wind that comes with that, the hard reality is it comes at a cost. And the cost benefit to shot ratio isn't there. And going back to just standard 55 grain fodder didn't make enough of a difference on our scores to care. And high power, which is extremely precision oriented, you need to use a certain grain weight at 200 yards, you need a different grain weight at 300, and then you use 80s at 600 or 500, and you need every little inch of accuracy you can get out of it. So therefore that dictates that. At 600 yards at high power, for example, I use 80 grain bullets that are loaded beyond mag length. Not conventional, not practical, but for that match, that's what I use. As an all-around go-to, I just go back to 55s. First of all, it does the job. You can hit stuff at distance with it. If you know what you're doing, it's fine. It doesn't recoil heavy. It's cheap. You can practice more. Practice is more important than the grain weight of the bullet you're choosing. So I would say reasonable quality, 55 grain bullets is more than sufficient. Adam M. Do you guys think that the adaptation of 7.62 NATO post-World War II stifled development of intermediate cartridges? Yep, absolutely. The U.S. was just hell-bent on 308, 30-06 and then 308, and they weren't going to give up on it while there were better alternatives out there that were demonstrably better and provable in a practical field of fire as being better in almost every way, shape, and form for the average infantryman. The U.S. ignored that and kept pushing 7.62 NATO, kind of jammed it down other people's throats as well. We saw that Cold War period where there was a bunch of 308 guns running around. The reality is, for the most part, except with very rare circumstance, you put an intermediate cartridge up, especially a 5.56 or 5.45 up against 308, and it just blows them away in everything you'd ever need to do practically, with very rare envelope exceptions. So did the adaptation of 7.62 NATO stifle the development of intermediate cartridges? Yep, absolutely did. At least it stifled the adaptation and increasing the tactics and skill set of our fighting forces. Leonard S. Karl, you mentioned in one of your videos that you would share your thoughts about ballistol. You plan to do that? Oh, yeah, just haven't got to it. Ballistol, if you don't know what it is a mineral-based cleaning. Well, actually, I don't know if it's mineral-based. Let me correct myself. It is a oil, gun cleaning oil, lubricant, / many things that was developed World War I-ish for the German forces. And it is still around in production. It smells like licorice. It's an incredibly useful lube, cleaner, etc. It is not really better. It's not the best for anything, but it does everything. You put a little water on it, it emulsifies. It's good for dealing with corrosive salts, dealing with black powder so that your barrels don't rust. Part of the reason Ballistol is great. You can still use it as a lubricant. It has a pretty decent flash point in terms of at least lubricating the gun, but you got to keep reapplying it. It's good as just a general cleaner of the gun. It works excellent for that. It smells relatively pleasant. It's actually an antiseptic. It's food safe, so if you get it in your food, it won't hurt you. It's not chemically. And so as a result, it also can be used to like treat oil or treat leather. Like your sling's getting dried out, you add Ballistol to it, it kind of absorbs in and makes the sling or the leather more pliable. Ballistol is kind of magical stuff, and I need to do a video about Ballistol in general, and hopefully we'll get there. Scott W. I would like to see InRange get together with other YouTube channels, including the Great War, to test the effectiveness of long-range rifle volley fire. Yeah, first of all, I'm not sure why we need to get along, that's not the right term, why we need to get together with other YouTube channels. We do our thing, they do their thing. Every once in a while, we might have a collab because there's a real good reason for it. Like I work a lot with primary and secondary, but there's not really a real collaborative reason for what we do. I think we're on a little bit of a different wavelength than a lot of other channels. There are some that we're obviously much more aligned with. I want to remind our audience that we are going to be working at the end of the year on a World War II project that's massively collaborative with Indy Nidell and a bunch of others. So there's a big collab coming for InRange at the end of 2018, so stay tuned for that. In terms of volley fire, extremely hard to test. You need a lot of range, you need a lot of targets. It may not be funding viable for us to do that regardless of working with others or not. Jake K. Could you talk about marksmanship standards in the armed forces historically for firearms and shooters and how they correspond to what shooters new to a match should expect? It would be great if you could share suggested competencies for shooters new to a match environment as well. You know, Jake, I would say that if you watch our two-gun matches, we do a lot of that. We already do talk about kind of the things we would expect you to do or be able to do to come to a two-gun match. I guess I should probably put a video together that's just the basics, how-to of how to not get DQ'd and how to come to a match. That would be worth doing, and that would be a video in and of itself. In terms of how military training in the armed forces correspond to what you would expect at a match, that's challenging because which historical armed force are you talking about? All of them trained a little differently. Talking about the U.S. forces, like for currently, or at least 80s, 90s, like the Army qual at the 300-yard pop-up range, is frankly quite minimal compared to what we do at a regular two-gun match. You'd find, I'm not trying to downplay anyone that qualled on the range, and I'm not saying that, but I've shot the Army 300-yard pop-up qual range. You can game it, and it's quite easy to get if you know what you're doing, it's good to get it's pretty reasonable to get a really good score there, like an expert score. And I would say that a lot of the stuff we put forth in two-gun, as well as at the Desert Brutality match, which is currently running on the channel, is significantly more difficult. The Marines, for example, go to the Dq'D range and they shoot the 200, 300, 500 meter across the course, which is like high power. That gives you incredible marksmanship drills. I know that they're diversifying outside of that, but I would say that that stuff doesn't necessarily apply to what we're doing in a much more run and gun environment. So run and gun environment has a different kind of muzzle discipline, trigger discipline, safety discipline. And while all that safety stuff is instilled at an armed forces training environment, it's not the same as what we do with two-gun. So I think I just need to do a video about that, Jake, and you've given me an idea. So thank you. Brandon T. Although decentralization is a good strategy to avoid destruction, it is not a good strategy for long-term survival. When YouTube Armageddon comes, you really need all XYT YouTube gun channels to focus on one non-YouTube source, as the more viewers that source has would gain equals more money it collects, thus it would be more financially fit. What are your thoughts on that? I don't agree. I think that we need decentralization across the board, and you're implying, again, advertiser model. I am not on board with the advertiser model. We may land up on an advertiser-supported network at some point at InRange because of my decentralization efforts. Full 30 is, in theory, advertiser-supported. The amount of revenue that comes from that is quite minimal. But I really strongly believe in viewer support. You guys supporting InRange tells me I'm doing the right job, at least to the audience that wants to watch InRange. I have no one above me telling me what I can or can't do with my content. I have no one dictating the length of my content, the clickbait or not clickbait of my content. And I also don't like the idea of all gun channels being only consolidated to specific places. Gun channels being stuck in a gun channel network only. While for 30s one, I'm not against this, but I prefer the broad base of content that YouTube has. I like the idea that you can go from a gun video to a video on how to make vegetarian food to a video about how a computer works, or to a discussion about local politics, or a review video of a car. That kind of diversity is powerful, and it normalizes the content. Gun content being pushed off of that normalization That out of the normal into the marginalized is not a good thing. And it was the reason, one of the sort of unspoken elements that I said by putting also Pornhub on my distribution network. I'm on Pornhub as well as, multiple other distribution networks. They have been marginalized, whether it is truly adult content or just risque content. That stuff is marginalized and not allowed in certain places. And therefore it has this implication of, oh, it's that stuff. And if we get all of our gun content shoved into that other corner of just that stuff, guess where we are? The same place they are. Don't like it. I don't want to be there. And I think that I'm not sure that a YouTube Armageddon is coming. And if it is coming, I think we need an alternative to YouTube that's not just guns. So hopefully we can get there, and we'll fight the fight and use our free speech on the internet and our digital rights to prove the point. And hopefully people will come to their senses. I always mess up your name. Amon, just going to say it. What are your thoughts on mag couplers? Are they a viable option or not worth it due to higher capacity magazines such as the D60? No, mag couplers are absolutely viable. They're excellent. In fact, there's a good argument to make that a mag coupler might just be better than a D60. They're almost easier to deal with. You still have to have that iterative reload, but you can mag couple almost anything. You can, if you don't have a D60, like you're using a gun that's not a 5.56 gun or not an AR, man, mag coupling stuff. You can take a standard plastic cartridge holder out of a 9mm box, put it between two mags and use a bunch of duct tape, and you have a good mag couple. Done it with a couple of guns. I've done it with AKs. I've done it with a lot of stuff. So I would absolutely say that mag couplers are fantastic. They're a viable option. D60 is probably a little better, but I would not eschew the mag coupler as a solution. Sean R. Karl, with all the time and effort you put in this project as well as many other projects I'm sure you're spinning, do you do anything for yourself, or what media, games, books do you consume just for you? Honestly, Sean, not really. This stuff takes pretty much your entire life up. I occasionally get away to play a little bit of Red Orchestra 2 on my computer and go out to eat once in a while. And I don't really shoot very much for myself except when I'm filming once in a while, but rarely. Do read books. I try to get away and get some book reading. But the honest truth is the InRange has become kind of an all-consuming time suck. And that's not a negative, it's just what it is. So when I have time to be doing something, I'm editing videos, scheduling videos, dealing with comments, dealing with Patreon, responding to questions and emails from across the board. So I honestly don't have a lot of time outside of InRange and my InfoSec stuff on the side to do much more. Bourbon. What are the reasons to choose a Glock 17 over a 19 and vice versa? Almost none. The 19 is better in almost every way. It's much more handleable, it's smaller, easier to deal with. A Glock, 17, when properly tuned, can have a little less recoil, has a little bit longer sight radius. But if you're going to put a red dot on it, if you're going to put a red dot and a comp on a 17 and get the springs just right, the Glock literally 17 does not move when you fire it. The 19 in a Roland Special Guy still does. But if it's just a stock Glock 19 versus a 17, I would say, except for sight radius, there is absolutely zero reason to get a 17. Go with the 19. Paul R. You guys ever get bored with a project or find it difficult to continue making efforts towards a certain goal? Bored's not the right word, but sometimes it gets overwhelming. Like you're working and you go, oh my God, I have this much stuff still to do on this particular video. And you realize how overwhelming it is. And some days you're motivated and some days you're not. I would say that working on InRange is what you would call a creative endeavor. And if you try to force a video, you try to make the video happen, it doesn't have the life, it doesn't have the feel, the positive energy that you want when you're just ready to go do it. So if something's kind of being a challenge, set it to the side, let the video sit there, and then get back to it. And then when the energy's there, it'll come out right, and that's what you want. So yeah, sometimes it's a challenge, but it's not boring. It's just you'd have to wait for the creative juices to flow, and then do it. Justin, asked this before, but if you were able to tour any ocean battlefield in the Pacific, where would you go? Oh, sorry you've asked this before, but I'm going to be very bored and cliche with my answer. I would go to Iwo Jima. Iwo Jima was the iconic Pacific War theater battle, and it is still iconic to this day, and it's still remote, and there's still stuff laying there on the beach. So if I could go to any of them, I would go to Iwo Jima. And I don't remember the Japanese name for it, or is that the Japanese name? I don't know. I would go to Iwo Jima. Ethan S. Did you ever consider doing a side charging handle for the What Would Stoner Do project? No. I believe that the charging handle on the AR, while it was sort of a hack in the first place, turned out to be a fantastic solution. It keeps the gun sealed from dirt and debris and mud and whatever when it's closed. It is ambidextrous. You can make it a little better by putting on different charging handles, but in general, it's ambi. So no, I think a side charging handle actually introduces more problems to the AR-15 than improves them. It removes some ambidextrousness, and it increases the chance of dirt getting into the action by having a big slot cut into the gun. So I did not consider it ever. Dave A. Before the advent of modern chronograph, the ballistic pendulum was used to measure a bullet's velocity. How accurate were these? Well, Dave, there was actually a lot more than just the ballistic pendulum. That was the first one. There was one guy that came up with spinning discs. So there was a disc spinning, and they were on a pole. And as the disc spun, so imagine a disc, a pole, and a disc, and it's spinning at a known speed. And you fire a bullet, and it goes through both discs. Well, the distance between where the holes impacted on that disc would also dictate the speed of the bullet, because you can take the math of the distance between the discs, the time and travel of the disc, the velocity of the disc, do a bunch of math stuff, and you know velocity. Ballistic pendulum hung from a string. The bullet would actually get captured in the pendulum and it would swim upward. And by determining how much that pendulum swung, you could determine velocity. Someone else came with little metal discs that as you broke the metal discs, it would send a little electric signal. And of course, now we have the chronograph. So I don't have exact numbers, but I believe that all those systems, as long as the math was right, were reasonably accurate. In fact, we have accuracy, we have ballistic data, speed and velocity data from the 1800s that were generated from tools like this. And then you load the same powder charge into a cartridge today, and for the most part, you get the same result. So that to me tells me that they were at least close. I think an entire video on different ways of measuring ballistics would be worthwhile on InRange. I'll look at that in the future. Nathan S. If the NFA did not exist, do you think there would be more development in practical machine pistols? Yes, absolutely. I think of all the things the NFA has destroyed the most, it's the ability to stock pistols and run machine pistols. I think machine pistols and stocked pistols have been very damaged in terms of development as a result, and I think they have a really interesting place and niche place in the shooting sports as well as in maybe even police and law enforcement. So yes, the NFA has done a lot of damage to that. Brian R. Do you prefer the simplicity of the traditional AR DI system or the newer pistol systems like companies like HA and Adams Arms are doing? What are the pros and cons of either? I absolutely prefer, for most people, let me qualify, most people, the traditional DI system. Let me remind you, it's not truly DI. The bolt in an AR actually is the piston. But there's less moving, reciprocating parts. There's less shifting of mass. The gun gets hot in a place where you're not holding it. It actually gets hot in the bolt carrier group as opposed to the handguard. That actually matters, except where the gas tube is, of course. It is, when done properly, very reliable. There are windows that the DI system does not apply as well. For very short barrels, those things, that's where the pistons start coming into place. It was the reason for looking and seeing the HK 416 came about, was because they wanted much shorter barrels, and the DI system has problems with that no matter how much you tune it because of the amount of time and etc. So there are places for the piston, and but I would say that the piston, generally speaking, introduces more problems than benefits. It generates heat in a place where you have to hold the gun. There are things like carrier tilt, carrier shift that occur as a result. There's now more points of places to clean the gun that you have to clean. So I would say for the predominant amount of users that would ever use an AR style system, I would say even including the military, you are better off with the DI system than you are with the pistons. Now the world seems to disagree and everybody's going to the HK, but that's my opinion. Andreas N. What is the safest cryptocurrency that is likely to last long and doesn't use up much energy to do mining? This is a huge, could be multiple video conversation, and I'm just going to answer this very simply. There isn't one. None of this cryptocurrency is safe, and I'm just waiting. First of all, there are significant issues going on with the blockchain technologies. For example, you may not be aware of this, but people have found ways to embed content into the blockchain that's data that has nothing to do with the transactional data, and there's some stuff in the Bitcoin wallet that is illegal to possess. As a result of that, that means anyone that has the full blockchain Bitcoin wallet, guess what they've got? Illegal content on their computer. That's just the way this kind of stuff works. Does that matter? I don't know. But when you ask me what is the safest cryptocurrency, I'm going to say none of them. I'm not saying don't use them. I'm not saying don't experiment with them, but none of them are safe. It is an emergent, disruptive technology, and we're going to see governments or a government or any of them or other things go on with it that are going to be very, very disruptive and challenging and problematic. So it hasn't happened yet, but it's coming. Mark my words. I have no doubt about it. Anthony L. What would be your #1 Old West site to stop at on a road trip of the Southwest U.S.? Really into history, but my schedule is too tight to do everything. I haven't seen them all, so I can't give you all of them, but I'll tell you the one that I think would be the most interesting, most iconic, that is still really in its original state. And I would recommend you Lincoln, New Mexico. Lincoln, New Mexico is small. You could really only spend a day or two there if you're really digging into it. But the stuff you can see in Lincoln or just around Lincoln is amazing because it hasn't changed really since the Lincoln County War. You can still go into the Lincoln County Courthouse and you can see the bullet in the wall that Billy the Kid fired when he escaped the courthouse trying to evade his execution. So I would recommend Lincoln, New Mexico as your #1 stop. And it is an incredible place that is rich with history that has been highly unaltered. Tombstone is rich with history, but it's been very altered and very touristy. You have to know what you're looking for in Tombstone. So I would not recommend Tombstone as the #1. Of the places I've been, Lincoln, New Mexico is the one that really strikes me as the winner. Hopefully you'll check it out someday. Ethan S. Regarding the What Would Stoner Do project, did you consider a foregrip bipod combination? No, because I've used them before. I have a drawer full of those grip pods. It's a grip that lays out front and you push a button and this little bipod pops out. What it is, it's neither a very good grip nor is it a very good bipod. They're all wobbly. None of them work very well. They're all unstable and they're all way too long. So you have this gigantic thing hanging off the front of the gun, which is just in the way. When I want a vertical grip, I want it to be stubby and out of the way. So you have this long thing, and then when you deploy it as a bipod, it's just awkward. So while I think it's a clever idea, I didn't even bother trying it because I've used a number of them in the past and kind of hated all of them. So there you go. Eric C., what advice would you give someone about to shoot in Trooper for the first time? Can you think of any essential piece of kit that a newer competitor might not think of? Well, in Trooper, you have to have your repair. You have to be able to maintain and repair your gun throughout the course of fire if something goes wrong. So generally speaking, ARs are very reliable guns, but here's what I would recommend. Do not carry an entire other gun. That would be ridiculous. Carry an entire complete bolt carrier group. Bolt, carrier, everything in your bag. If something goes wrong with an AR, it's 99% of the time something catastrophic. I mean, going to be something with the bolt carrier group. Your bolt could shed a lug or something, or it could crack or something like that. Firing pin breaks. I don't know. But if you have a complete bolt carrier group in your bag, assuming you're using an AR, the chances of you not being able to complete the match is quite unlikely because you'll probably be able just to throw a new bolt carrier group in, keep on chugging. Obviously, whatever things you need for yourself, but I would highly recommend a spare bolt carrier group. Kyler H., caseless ammunition. Is there any future? I don't think so. I think the technology of caseless ammunition is extremely compelling. The idea of reducing the weight is completely compelling, but I think we're going to see improvements with polymer-cased ammunitions and things like that first or only. Caseless ammunition has issues in terms of not just heat and heat generation and heat expelling, but it's fragile. The stuff tends to crumble and crack. Remember, the propellant is the cartridge case, unless something magical happens there. And then if something malfunctions in the gun, how do you clear the gun? Ejection port. Generally speaking, there's not an ejection port with something that's caseless, so you'd have to make an ejection port, I guess, or some sort of access port. It's a complicated system. I think there was some promise there that never came through, and I don't think we're going to see any future real successful development of caseless ammunition. I think we're going to see collapsing ammunition that actually expands during the firing cycle. I think we're going to see polymer ammunition. We're going to see weight reduction things. We're going to see powders that increase velocity, projectile improvements in evolution, but I don't think we're going to see a big difference or any real evolution of caseless ammunition. Well, that's it for these questions for today. I think we're at about an hour and I'm out of breath. So guys, hopefully you appreciate and enjoyed this Q&A, even though it was just me. Tried to do my best. I know I speak fast. It's just my nature. It's a lot better when there's two of us to go back and forth. But please, let me thank you for being a Patreon supporter. You guys keep this channel alive. As you know, and I've said it here in this discussion, we take no advertising revenue. We are not sponsored content. We are completely dependent on Patreon and support from viewers like you. $5 and above gets you into the Q&A. Hopefully I'll get to your question eventually. $1 and above keeps the channel alive and gets you into our monthly giveaways. I want to appreciate everyone that does that. If you can't support us on Patreon, I totally understand. Please check out InRange.tv for all of our content distribution networks. We're decentralized across the board. Subscribe to as many of them as you can and share with your friends because that's important to us as well. Thanks a lot.